Joining me now is NBC's Garrett Haake at the Trump rally in North Carolina, NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, who is covering the Harris campaign, and with me here on set is NBC News chief political analyst Todd. Garrett, let me go to you. Start things off. Obviously, we hear this growing chorus from Republicans urging Donald Trump to stay on message. What is the reaction inside the campaign? What's the strategy today?
Forgive me, Kristen, I lost the last bit of your question as Donald Trump is getting introduced on stage behind me right now. Look, I think the Trump campaign largely agree, at least conceptually, with the idea that they need to be more focused on Kamala Harris's record, on her policy positions. They have said as much that they believe her own policies are the key to her defeat, and her own manner of discussing them are the tools they'll use to get there. It's just been the candidate who's not been consistently dialed in on that issue. And I think this Trump campaign, having had the benefit of watching the last two, knows that there's only so much they can do to force their candidate to stay on message. Although something like this today, an event that is both thematically and physically built out to focus on the economy, with economic focused messaging appearing behind Trump on stage, and the campaign reminding people all week long that this is not a rally, it is an economic messaging event, has almost meant, I think, as a message to the candidate, as much as for those of us covering it, that this is what this is going to be about, at least they hope.
Yeah, well, Garrett, amazing job barreling through there. Let me ask you a very quick follow-up before Trump takes the podium. He announced this press conference for tomorrow. It was his press conference last week that roiled a lot of his allies. What's the thinking behind this press conference, and are his allies concerned that it's just going to be another example of him going off message?
Well, look, Kristen, I don't have specific reporting on the reaction of allies to this, but I do get the sense, based on the time I've spent covering Trump across 3 campaigns now, that this press conference is almost certainly the candidate's idea, as much, if not more so, than the campaign's. It's at a Trump property. It lacks, at least on its face, any specific focus. It's obviously not in a battleground state. Much like the event at Mar-a-Lago, where I think you had a confluence of reporters who were already in Palm Beach, Trump taking the opportunity to seize on us just being there to go out and talk. I do think the campaign thinks they can generate more pressure on Kamala Harris to ultimately go out in front of a camera and take questions, something they think will be bad for her. They just think she will be a poor performer when she eventually does take questions. Maybe they think they can turn up the heat in that way, but you're absolutely right. The questions from however many reporters are credentialed to attend this event tomorrow are not going to be focused on the economy, at least not solely. They're going to be on all these other issues and all these other tangents that Donald Trump has embraced over the last week since his last press conference. And who knows what new rabbit holes will emerge out of that event.
Yeah, well, we know that you'll be there pressing him, listening very closely and asking all of the tough questions. Garrett Haake, thank you for that. And we are going to listen to what President Trump, former President Trump, has to say, and we'll bring you any news that comes out of that event. I do want to go to Yamiche. Yamiche, let's pick up on where Garrett left off, which is the strategy that we are seeing from Donald Trump, from his campaign, to try to pressure Vice President Kamala Harris to do more press conferences, more interviews. This is the recent statement that they just put out. It's been 24 days, and Kamala Harris continues to duck and hide from the media. No interviews, no press conferences since she announced her campaign is hiding Kamala in the basement because they know she owns every single disastrous policy record of the Biden-Harris administration. What is the reaction inside the Harris campaign? And there is a sense that she's going to be doing interviews after the Democratic National Convention, right?
That's right. My sense in talking to campaign officials and also talking to allies of Vice President Harris is that she understands that she needs to sit down for a substantive interview, a sit-down interview. My understanding is that the campaign wants to make this a joint interview between her and Governor Walz, her running mate. That being said, she has been engaging the press. So I want to just make sure that we do underscore the fact that she is talking to reporters. She has taken some questions. She has not done a full-on press conference. She has not done a big interview interview since she became the nominee, but we are getting some questions in here and there. We always want more, but the Harris campaign is also looking at the Trump campaign and saying, if this is the best that you've got, just based on my conversations, then this really is going to be problematic for the Trump campaign. They see the Trump campaign as really scrambling here and not really able to land anything. I think it's interesting that Nikki Haley was on another network talking about the fact that she doesn't also like this sort of strategy by the Trump campaign to try to pressure Harris to do an interview to talk about her race. Nikki Haley saying that really isn't working for Republicans, and the Harris campaign essentially is saying the same thing, saying that this is not going to be what sort of sinks their ship, that they feel like they're good, that they're building organizations, that they have a real handle on sort of how to bring this enthusiasm into actual votes. So they're just not seeming to be worried here, though we do expect a bigger interview sometime probably after the DNC is my reporting.
Well, and I know, Yamiche, you've also been reporting on this event that Vice President Harris is set to hold later this week. It's going to be focused on the economy. And I think the big question on everyone's mind is how much detail will we get from the vice president? And will there be daylight between her policies that she will roll out at some point, we would anticipate, and President Biden's policies?
Well, Kirsten, this is one of those weeks where political reporters like you, me, and Garrett, we circle North Carolina on our maps because that is where, of course, Trump is today, and Vice President Harris is going to be heading there on Friday. I'll be covering that, and she's going to be delivering this economic speech. My understanding is that there is going to be substantive policy there. The campaign and she herself has been saying that she's going to roll out a bigger plan, a sort of real detailed plan on her policies as it relates to the economy. She has been messaging on this sort of since the beginning, talking about the fact that the middle class needs to be at the center of her campaign, that people need to feel like the economy is working for them, that people need to see sort of at their kitchen table a better situation for everyone involved in America, and especially people who are struggling. That being said, I think the big question is going to be, where is going to be the daylight? My understanding is that her campaign isn't going to want to be seen as breaking with President Biden. She has a lot of respect for him. She understands really that she wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for him picking her as a running mate, and then of course leaving the ticket and leading and endorsing her. So, but my sense is that they're going to say, look, the Biden campaign and the Biden administration did some great things. We want to push it forward and do more and try to build on that.
All right. Well, we will see just how much detail she gets into. Yamiche, thank you so much for your great reporting. As always, Chuck Todd, I want to turn to you. We'll get to your column in just a moment, but let's break down these new numbers from the Cook Political Report. Top line, they show movement in Harris's direction. They show, and if we could put the numbers up, they show basically that a number of these key battleground states are effectively a toss-up with momentum for Harris in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina. What do you make of this?
I think this is the announcement bump a little bit, and you have to sort of, and what'll be interesting to see is this her convention bump sort of happening a little bit earlier? I think we saw that with Trump. Trump got his convention bump a little bit earlier with the Vance pick and all of that stuff as that was setting up. This was even pre-assassination attempt. That all itself had some impact on the polling as well. So I am going to be curious to see, is there any more room for her to grow? Because what you really have seen in all these numbers over the last week is she got the wayward Democrats back. Right. There was a whole group of voters who voted Biden in 2020 who were not happy with Biden. And they were they up for grabs for Trump? Were they flirting with some third-party candidates? We've seen the collapse of the third-party candidates almost across the board, particularly the two most left-wing ones, Jill Stein and Cornel West. They're barely registering anymore. And then whatever Democrats Kennedy had have gone away. Kennedy's down to mid to low single digits in almost all of these places. And so whatever wayward Democrat was there, she's got. We're still looking, like I look at it this way, we just had one bump for Trump, and now we've got one. It's sort of like it's a seesaw, right? I do think in about 3 weeks, we're going to settle into what will look very familiar to all of us. Look as much like 2012 as it did, I think, now, which will be a 1 to 2 point race for the rest of the way.
And right now, I mean, she does seem to also have some momentum with the so-called double haters.
I don't think there are as many double haters.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
The double haters basically are no more.
Because some of these double haters were wayward Democrats. So those that were already predisposed to leaning to the left, they suddenly don't hate the nominee. They're giving her a shot. So the double hater group, it's just like what happened with Biden. The double haters were smaller in 2020. The double haters were a large cohort in 2016. Look, I am getting more and more convinced than ever that we could actually be seeing essentially the mirror image of 2016, where Trump is the incumbent who's not in office, just like Hillary was the incumbent who was not in office, and Harris is something new. We haven't tried that. Trump was, we hadn't tried that. And that right now, I think, is probably her best asset. You
lead me to your column, but we should point out, it's fascinating that you're saying she's something new. She's the sitting vice president, and she is running as the shining
And here's
new
the
object.
irony, right? This has been, I think, a fairly miserable experience for her as vice president, because it's pretty clear the Biden people did ice her out a lot, didn't want her involved. Might be the best thing to happen to her candidacy. She doesn't have that many fingerprints on the Biden administration. I think some of the public believes that. It's why some of this polling shows they think she's going to govern in a new direction. And it's a fair assumption because she really wasn't brought into the inner circle. So many people try to keep her out. Yeah, it does feel like we are witnessing her reintroduction to the world. I want to read a portion of your column in which you talk about 2016. You say disdain from one candidate can turn swing voters against that campaign and toward the target. The best example of that, Hillary Clinton, who clearly never viewed Trump as a worthy opponent in 2016. The deplorables comment only reinforced that view. It's possible the less respect he shows for Harris, the less scared the public will be to give her a chance. Explain. Well, I'm told that he's been told this, that you don't respect her, and voters, the voters are sitting there going, and there was no doubt Hillary Clinton did not respect Donald Trump, didn't think he belonged on the debate stage, didn't want to do any of those things. And then deplorables was the sort of exclamation point. And voters were turned off by that. This lack of respect, this is turning off, I think, Republican-leaning women. It's turning off Republican-leaning voters of color. Plenty of people are first or second generation Americans and are really proud of it. I was just at a citizenship ceremony about 2 weeks ago. It's one of the most moving experiences you can have as an American. And by the way, few people recognize me. These were very politically diverse new citizens. If he's out there insulting these new citizens or insulting first generation immigrants, he's potentially insulting people who are predisposed to maybe distrust government and sort of want to be on the right. It is one of these, he is his own worst enemy. Right. And I think it's starting to multiply. And Chuck, what does that mean in a state like North Carolina, which, as we said, Democrats haven't won since 2008, but you can see Harris has a very minor lead there within the margin of error. Do you think that state could be in play? Look, I do think it's in play if the African-American base gets fired up. Look, Barack Obama carried it once. Right. They didn't carry it twice. No. It didn't have the same impact the first time. But what it does is it puts the state in play. It's still, I think the swing voter is sort of a center-right voter. So it's going to be difficult. It is, perhaps the abortion issue can be the sort of the second issue there. But it is pretty important for the Harris campaign to put pressure on Trump's path to 270. Right now, all the pressure is on her path to 270 in the 3 northern states. She needs to put pressure on him in either Georgia or North Carolina. In this cycle, it looks like North Carolina is the better option. All right. Chuck Todd breaking it all down for us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great to see you, as always.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.